All right, IM2 classes. Today we are continuing on with our factoring. We are going to be factoring trinomials today. First thing we're going to get into is what a lot of people refer to as diamond problems. I call them X factors because they no longer really look like diamonds. Back when I was in school, they would be diamonds like this, and they call them a diamond problem. But they're not really diamonds anymore, so I just call them X factors. Uh, so we're gonna these are kind of like little puzzles. On the top is a product. So remember, product means you get that by multiplying. On the bottom is a sum. And remember, you get sums by adding. To fill in the sides of our X factor, we want two numbers that multiply to get 20, add to get 9. Um, from here, it really is guess and check. You can use a multiplication table to help you out with it. What you want to do is think of the pairs of numbers that multiply to get 20 and then check to see if they add to 9. You can make lists. So the pairs of numbers that multiply to get 20 would be 1 and 20, 2 times 10, and then 4 times 5, and then see which of these add to 9. That's 21. This would be 12. 4 plus 5 is 9. So the sides of our X factor are 4 and 5. So another example, 44 negative 15. So when the top is positive and the bottom is negative, that means our two side numbers are both going to be negative. So the pairs of numbers that add to or multiply to 44 would be 1 and 44, 2 and 22, 3 doesn't know, 4 and 11. And I believe that is it. Since it's negative, they would both be negative. And the pair that is going to add to negative 15 is negative 4 and 11. That's negative 15. So negative 4, negative 11. Common question I get all the time is, does it matter what side you put it on? No, this does not matter. This can be um, negative 11, negative 4. Doesn't matter. Follow your heart. Put on any side. When we have negative numbers on top, that means one of our side numbers is going to be negative, one of them is going to be positive. So the two numbers that multiply get 21, there's only two pairs of numbers that multiply get 21. 1 and 21 and 3 and 7, 3 times 7. So obviously we're not going to make a 4 out of 3 of 1 and 21. We can make a negative 4 with a 3 and 7. We would need a negative 7. So you want to double check to see which one's going to be negative. So it's going to be a positive 3, negative 7. All right. 36, there's lots of pairs of numbers that multiply at 36. That'd be 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. So which of these are going to be able to make a a 9, keeping in mind that since the top is negative, one of our factors is, excuse me, is going to be negative. So that's going to be down here. I can make a 9 with a 3 and 12. Since the 9 is positive, it's going to be a negative 3 plus a positive 12 is a positive 9. So while we're doing this, while you're practicing, you may want to make the list. But as we do more and more of these, we are going to do a lot of them. You don't need to make the list. This is something eventually you should be able to just do in your head, just do the guessing and checking going along in your head. But as we're practicing, it might be helpful to make the list, but by no means do I expect to ever see the list out. This is something you should be able to do in your head. Um, and what we're going to use those for is factoring trinomials. So what we're going to do is split this into two binomial factors that we multiply together to get this original trinomial here. So steps here, we're going to set up and complete the X factor. So I'm going to make an X. The last number on top, the last number is is our product, so the 6 goes on top. The middle number is on bottom. So the middle number, just the number, not the variable attached to it. Um, that is going to go on bottom, and then we complete the X factor. So what are the two numbers that multiply to positive 6 add to negative 5? That's going to be negative 2 and negative 3. All right. The next process here is I'm going to split the middle term. Here and here, I'm going to split that -5 into a -2 times -3. So -5a is going to split into -2a plus -3a. All right. This is the step that confuses kids the most at the very beginning. All right. We're taking that middle number and just splitting it into. So -5 is -2 plus -3. Just splitting the middle term. Once you have that split, you're going to bring down the rest of the polynomial. So it'll be a squared minus 2a plus -3a plus 6. And then we are going to factor by grouping. If you need a reminder how to do that, check out the last lesson. But to factor by grouping, what you're going to do is group the first two terms together and the last two terms together, and you're going to do it, find a greatest common factor, a GCF on each grouping. Greatest common factor of a squared and -2a is a. So that first grouping factors into a times a minus 2 plus the greatest common factor on -3 and 6. That's going to be 3. Since the first term is negative, we are going to divide by a negative. That's going to be -3 here. And then we divide. So -3a divided by -3 is a. 6 divided by -3 is -2. Notice how we have a minus 2 and a minus 2. So we have grouped the things together. So now we're going to regroup in our factors. So the first grouping is going to be the first factor, I should say, is going to be our GCFs grouped together. So it's going to be a plus a -3, or rather just a minus 3 is fine. And then the second one is the a minus 2, that identical factor from those. And that is our answer, a minus 3 times a minus 2. There is a shortcut to this. We will talk about that shortcut in class, but as you work through these, you may find a shortcut with some of these. It doesn't work on all of them, and we'll talk about what it works for and what it doesn't in class a lot. But if you notice a shortcut on these, go ahead, feel free to use it. I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to go to number 7. We do the other ones in class, but for the purpose, I don't want a half-hour long video, so I'm just going to do one more here. So I'm going to complete my X factor. So it's going to be a -72 on top. So note that since it's -72 at end, that means in the X factor, it's a negative number. We need to remember in R, it's not going to be an R at the bottom. We have that invisible math. There's a 1 in front of the R. So it's going to be 1 on the bottom of the X factor. So remember that invisible math when you're filling in your X factor. Two numbers that multiply to -72 and add to 1, that's going to be a +9, -8. All right. So the next step is I'm going to take this 1 and I'm going to split it into a 9R plus a -8R. So 9R plus -8R is 1R. Separate out that term and then do the factor by grouping. So bring down the rest of the polynomial. So R squared plus 9R plus -8R minus 72. Now do the factor by grouping. Group the first two terms together, last two terms together. Greatest common factor of R squared and 9R is R. So that first grouping factors into R times R squared divided by R is R, plus 9R divided by R is 9. Plus greatest common factor between 8 and 72 is 8. Since the first term is negative, I'm going to divide by -8. Right? So it's going to be -8 on the outside. -8R divided by -8 is R. -72 divided by -8 is +9. Again, notice how we have R plus 9, R plus 9. Those are identical. So we did our factors correctly. So we can regroup into our final factors here. So the first grouping, or the first factors, are GCFs grouped together. So it's R minus 8. And then the last one is R plus 9. So just reminder, the invisible math, if there's not a number attached to that middle term, it's a 1. All right. Here, last type of problem. it's the same thing. The X factor is just a little bit different, setting up that X factor. Notice how we have a 2 in front of the X squared. With that 2 in front of the X squared, we have to do something different to get the top number. And just a minute ago, I talked about how there's a shortcut to these. The shortcut doesn't work on these where it has the 2 or it has a number in front of the X squared. Right. So if you've been doing these and you picked up on the shortcut on the last couple problems, it doesn't work on these. You have to do the factor by grouping step. Um, but we'll talk about that in class. Uh, so here, uh, to get the top, it's the product of the first and last number goes on top. So the first number is 2, the last number is 4. So I'm going to take these two numbers and I'm going to take the product of them. So remember, product means to multiply. So multiply those two numbers. 2 times 4 is 8. That middle number still goes on the bottom, and now we can complete the X factor. Um, Two numbers that multiply to 8, add to 9, that is going to be 8 and 1. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. Now I got to set up the factor by grouping. So I'm going to take the middle term, the 9x, and I'm going to split that into 8x plus 1x. So again, 8x plus 1x is 9x. Bring down the rest of the polynomial. So 2x squared plus 8x plus 1x plus 4. And now do the factor by grouping. I'm going to group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. Find the greatest common factor of each grouping. So the greatest common factor of 2x squared and 8x, that's going to be 2x. So that first grouping factors into 2x times, here 2x squared divided by 2x is x, 8x divided by 2x is 4. 8 divided by 2 is 4, x's cancel out. Plus 1x and 4. That does not have a greatest common factor. What we need to remember when they don't have anything in common is we want to divide by 1, because for the last step of factor by grouping, we need another GCF to group together with that 2x. So we divide by 1. What's convenient is that doesn't change that grouping, 1x plus 4. I'm just going to write as x plus 4 so that we can see that these do, in fact, actually match. And so once those match, then we're good. We can put them regroup together on our factors. So the first factor is the GCFs grouped together. So it's 2x plus 1. And then the identical factor, x plus 4, is left over. There we go. Let's do one more. Perfect. So again, we're gonna set up and complete the X factor. Since there's a number in front of the A squared, when there's a number in front here, you have to take the first number and last number together, take these two, and we are going to multiply those together. So 5 times -10 is -50. 23 on bottom. Factors -50, that added 23. That's going to be a positive 25 and a -2. So I got to set up the factor by grouping step. So I'm going to take my -20 or my 23a. I'm going to split it into a 25a plus a -2a. So 25a plus -2a is 23a. Again, splitting that up to set up the factor by grouping step. So bring down the rest of the polynomial. From here, I'm going to group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. Greatest common factor on 5a squared plus 25a. That's going to be 5a. So that first grouping factors into 5a times 5a squared divided by 5a is just a. 25a divided by 5 is 5. Plus -2a minus 10. The greatest common factor between 2 and 10 is 2. Since the first number is negative, I'm going to divide by a negative. So it'll be -2 on the outside. -2a divided by -2 is a. -10 divided by -2 is +5. Again, notice we have identical factors here. So we did our grouping correctly. So we can move on to the regrouping into the final factors. The first factor is the GCFs grouped together. So 5A minus 2. And then we have the A plus 5. Awesome. And that will do it for this time. Next time we will be doing um, factoring special products. We'll see you then.